Hey friend, it's a beautiful evening here in the garden and you're watching episode 2 of The Grower's Diary. The Grower's Diary is simply this. I set out to document everything I do every single week in the garden over the course of the entire season. Challenging? Yes. Will I make it? I don't know. I really hope so. But it would mean a lot to me if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. I thought it would be interesting to document just how much time I spend every week in the garden, because I already do that with my blogs and YouTube and my tasks and everything. So this week I spent 3 hours in the garden over the course of 2 days. I wanted to squeeze 3 days in there, but yesterday it started to snow, which was a bummer. But today is a gorgeous day, so it's all forgotten. And before we dive into all the sewing, I just want to remind you that I have a sewing calendar that I made myself and that you can download for free. It's linked in the description in the box below. Sorry for the noisy video, there's a road behind me and a lot of cars going by at this hour, but anyway, moving on. Okay, so first things first, I did a lot of work in this mini polytunnel. In my last episode, I mentioned that I used to grow most of my seeds inside under grow lights, and if you're an A-type personality, control freak like me, that's amazing. It's awesome. You can control the spacing in your entire garden, and voila, you have tiny plants all over your garden all at once when you transplant them. So it's really nice. I recommend it to everyone, but unfortunately I'm not going to have that room available anymore. So we're gonna have to make do with this makeshift polytunnel. It's not the best thing ever. I'm finding it very difficult to open it and close it without ripping it apart. But it's just gonna have to do for now until we get a greenhouse or have a grow room again. So I processed the soil a little bit to make it fluffier. I added a few bags of compost just to give it some nutrition and just to give it some medium that retains a little bit more moisture than my native soil. What I'm growing inside the mini polytunnel at the moment are a bunch of lettuce varieties, some kohlrabi and some kale, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about all of them. I have a video on my channel about sowing lettuce in trays and then pricking it out. I recommend you go watch that, but what I do is thickly sow all my lettuce inside one tiny tray, and then I prick the lettuce seedling plants individually into bigger trays, and then I transplant them in the garden. Well, I'm gonna try to replicate that inside this mini polytunnel, and I have 6 favorite varieties that I want to share with you, varieties that I've sown basically every single season since I've been here. So my favorite lettuce varieties are Lolo Rosa, Lolo Bionda, Four Season Wonder or Merveille de Quatre Saisons, something in French, Four Season Wonder, American Brown, Little Gem, and Great Lakes. And what I usually do is wait until they're large enough. In this polytunnel, I'm just going to wait until they germinate and get large enough, and then I'm going to transplant them in the garden. Once they're in the garden, we're just going to pick the leaves that are lowest to the ground and just pick around the lettuce, and it's going to regenerate for up to 2 or even 3 months, at which point I'm going to sow a new batch of lettuce if it's not too hot outside. I've also sown a couple of rows of lettuce directly outdoors, and those are going to be the lettuces that I'm not going to grow as heads, so they're not going to be properly spaced. They're just going to be extremely packed together, and we're going to harvest them using scissors as a cut and come again method. The second thing I've sown inside this seed bed is kohlrabi. Now, we're huge kohlrabi fans. We grow every shape, color, and size of kohlrabi, and my husband in particular enjoys to have them at every single meal. So the pressure was on for growing kohlrabi. The problem that I have with directly sowing it in the ground is that it quickly gets eaten by slugs and snails and even flea beetles. So I'm going to try and protect it with this polytunnel and make it germinate faster. The main varieties of kohlrabi that I recommend are Lanro and Delicatus Blower. Now, Lanro is my absolute favorite. It gets really big if you allow it, and it's still crunchy like an apple inside, so it doesn't get woody at all. And the best time to sow it actually in my climate is in July or August, so you can harvest it in September or October, but it works well in spring as well. So lawn row, remember that name, it's an absolute favorite of ours. And lastly, I've also sown some kale inside the polytunnel. We are not huge kale fans. I like to have a few kale plants every single season, but I don't manage to do a lot of smoothies, to be honest. So every year I promised myself I would use my kale, but I really don't. We'll see what happens. So in this bed I've sown my other leafy greens and I've covered them with some fleece. Now this is another trick that can help you germinate seeds faster when it's really cold in early spring, and it can also protect them from hungry birds and pests like the notorious flea beetle that we have here. In this bed I've sown some arugula and spinach, as well as some directly sown lettuce that I mentioned before. And what I want to say about arugula and spinach is that in our climate their season is extremely short and they go to seed fairly quickly, so we only get to enjoy them for a couple of weeks. If you have the same problem, then I'd advise you to maybe sow arugula in autumn as the weather cools down, and it will last you for much longer. And another thing about fleece is that you can actually water through it, no need to take it off, just lift it and take a little peek to see how your plants are doing, but otherwise just keep it on until the danger of frost has passed. Next up we have parsley. Now this bed was very weedy, so I had to spend quite some time to get rid of all the weeds and all the old kale plants. I spent a lot of time weeding in my garden actually because I didn't mulch as much and I used manure, which brings a lot of weed seeds. So I gave in and bought one of these weeding hand tools, and now I really can't live without it. I'm gonna link it in the description below just to know the brand because I think it's really sturdy and nice. So what I ended up doing was weed my entire bed, just till my soil by hand a little bit, and then broadcast my entire seed packet of parsley in there, because I don't really grow parsley from seed. I grow it indoors and then transplant it outside, and that's how I have my success with parsley. But I think it's just gonna be like carrots, so I've sown it thickly and I'd rather thin it than not have parsley at all. And that goes with all my seeds. If you're asking me about sowing distance, I'm not gonna give you that today. I'm just gonna say, if you're in doubt, just sow as thickly as possible and then just thin it later, no big deal. The varieties of parsley that I grow again and again in my garden are called Italian giant flat, and I think it's curly parsley, but I'm not sure, but it's a parsley that's curly basically. And to give it even more of a chance to germinate, I decided to top it off with some compost so that it retains more moisture. And what I plan to do is just keep the ground fairly moist so that I give it the best chances to germinate. Oh, and one more thing, parsley is very slow at germinating, so don't give up on it if it's been 3, even 4 weeks. Just be patient. And the last thing that I managed to do in the garden this week was get my peas in, and they're going to climb on these ugly trellises behind me that I'm gonna change these as soon as possible, but so far they're doing their job. So I have 2 trellises that I've dedicated to peas, and the rest of the trellises in my garden are I'm gonna grow cucumbers on them, squash and beans probably. So with peas, it's really simple. I actually prefer to plant peas from modules as well. Shocker, I know. But I really do hope they germinate. I've sown them in a neat little row on this trellis and on that trellis over there. And I've also sown some peas inside a container. They're a small variety of peas, so they don't need a trellis to climb, just so that I get more of them in there. So that's it. That's what I did in 1 week. I wanted to do a little bit more, but I'm trying not to be a perfectionist here, and I advise you to do the same. Just go with the flow and squeeze in as much gardening time as you can. At the end of each gardening session, don't forget to do a little cleanup. Clean up your tools, gather your tools. Don't forget to throw all the seed packets and try not to leave a mess. I know that goes without saying, but sometimes I'm so tired I just leave everything as it is, and the following day is just a nightmare to deal with all that. My plan for next week is to probably order my potatoes, buy the onion sets that I really need to buy, probably prune my raspberries before they start to grow shoots, and we'll see what else we get to do in the garden. Don't forget to like, subscribe to my channel, and until next time, my friends, have a lovely gardening season.